And just like that, there's a new intro. Holy crap, you guys. So I know you guys really liked the old one, but I had to do something with the new one. So there's that. Yeah, right. The doll was scary. And it's just like timed with the yeah. I was like, yeah, this is the shit. I've been like sitting on that. I uploaded it and I was like, I'm like waiting and waiting. I'm like, I can't wait till the next episode because I can actually show everybody the new trailer. So I know it's not exactly twerking music like the last one, but you know, I guess we'll have to figure out a dance to go with that new music. So hello guys, and welcome back to the hook hanging on the door handle of your car as you sped away from the night at the creepy asylum. I am the crazed maniac wondering where you just went with my hook because I kind of need that. And the future ghost with the most, Vivian Noir. And not last week, because last week we actually had John and Victoria from GSI Paranormal on. Don't know if you guys caught that one. It was a great interview. The week before that, we had just scratched the surface of a man whose crimes shocked and stunned America. And before we get into that, as always, here comes the content warning. The subject matter we are about to discuss involves graphic depictions of murder, abuse, and sexual violence. It is not intended for younger viewers and those with sensitive natures. You have been warned. Also, side note, I have concocted something very dangerous. I have made a dangerous elixir, you guys. So this dangerous thing is the Bang Energy, the teas. I don't know if you guys have had those, but the regular sweet tea is it's okay. But there's a lemon drop lemon drop tea. It is that and bourbon, and there's a decent amount of bourbon in there, and I cannot taste the bourbon at all, you guys. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. And yes, I absolutely think that your 7-year-old niece, was it? Should definitely get a shirt. Like, Future Ghost, why not? We all want to be Future Ghost, don't we? Who has razor cut my hair to be wispy? Me. me, I did. Oh, this is bomb. This is bomb, and it's dangerous because I cannot taste the alcohol at all. Oh. Lordy, Michael Jordy, that is dangerous. Anyways, so, hey Crow, hey everybody who popped in, hey Whisper, hey Sabra, hey Mr. Bunny Lamekins, hey Cody, hey Frank. I'm just reading them as I see them, guys. Hey Max, hey Cassie, hey Electric Pagan, hey Jessica, hey, I think I got everybody? I think I got everybody. Anyways, so that's the round of hellos. If I missed anyone, oh Sean, hi Sean. If I missed anybody, I'll catch you on the rebound. So, trailing back to our story, to our sordid tale, where did we leave off last time? So let's get into it. Let's share a screen and let's get into that video, shall we? Because wait till you guys see the new. I've been doing a lot of editing and graphics and things, so let's just appreciate this little masterpiece now, shall we? Oh snap. So where did we leave off last week or last time? Yes. Number one fact number uno, John Wayne Gacy had killed at least 3 young men so far after amplifying his attacks from mere sexual assaults to full-on murders. And number 2, fuck clowns, you guys. Fuck no. So once Gacy's divorce was final and he had the home to himself outside of a few boarders who occasionally shared the home, he seemed to revel in his newly found freedom to go out seeking anonymous sex with young men. He admitted that post-divorce, he increased the frequency in which he would go out seeking anonymous sexual partners. He would refer to the years from 1975 on as his cruising years. And while Gacy remained civic-minded and outwardly cheerful and gregarious, friends noticed erratic changes in his behavior, including the increased company of young males and coming and going from odd hours, either very early or very late from his home. One neighbor recollected that for several years, the sounds of muffled screams, shouting, and crying had woken her son in the wee hours of the morning. She indicated that the sounds seemed to be emanating from a house near their own on Summerdale Avenue. In fact, teens in the uptown neighborhood alerted Chicago police to a man named John, who was frequently in the area picking up young men. Officers would stake out Gacy's home and witness dozens of young men going in and out of the home, and while many of them were stopped by the police for questioning, none of the youth said anything to incriminate Gacy at the time. But strange sounds and alerting neighbors to odd behavior didn't seem to deter Gacy for long. A switch had been flipped, and only about a month after his divorce from Carol was finalized, he abducted and murdered 18-year-old Daryl Sampson. Daryl was last seen in Chicago on April 6, 1976, but unfortunately it was also the last time he would be seen alive. He would be buried beneath the dining room of the home with a piece of cloth. Oh, sorry. Go back for a second. With a piece of cloth shoved down his throat, which is just yucks. 5 weeks later, on May 14th, 15-year-old Randall Reffitt vanished while walking home from Senn High School. Just off the street, just gone. So on the same day, only hours after Randall Reffitt went missing, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton vanished while on his way home from his sister's apartment. The bodies were found later buried together in the crawl space of Gacy's house of horrors, and investigators would estimate that both young men had been murdered on the same evening. Gacy's next victim, 17-year-old Michael Bonin, much like prior victim John Butkovich, liked working with his hands, like doing woodworking and carpentry, and was often engaged with many projects at the same time. He was working on restoring an old jukebox, sadly, something he would never get to finish when he vanished on June 5th on his way home from his stepbrother's house. Gacy would strangle Bonin with a ligature and bury his body beneath the spare bedroom of the house. 10 days later, and unwilling or unable to sate his increasing bloodlust, Gacy was seized on his next victim. William Billy Carroll Jr. was in and out of trouble for as long as his parents could remember. At 9, he found himself in a juvenile home for stealing a purse, and at 11, he was caught with a gun. A precocious and troubled youth, 16-year-old Billy spent much of his time on the streets in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago. He had found a niche working as a pimp, arranging meetings between young teenage gay men and adult clients for a cut of the commission. And while he had a very different upbringing and experience from the previous victims, they all had one unfortunate thing in common. They all ran afoul of John Wayne Gacy. On June 13th, Billy left his home and was never seen alive again. He was buried in a common grave under the crawl space under Gacy's house. Crazy active. Oh, crazy things. I'm sorry. I'm just like trying to catch up on the chat for a second, you guys. And I'm going to have to pause this one just because the timing of it, like I'm just kind of working on the timing. So we'll pause for a few times just to get the transitions lined up. Excuse me. Hello. So Billy Carroll was only the first of 4 victims who were known to have been murdered between June 13th and August 6, 1976. 3 were between 16 and 17 years old, and another unidentified male appeared to be an adult. On August 5th, 16-year-old Minnesota teen James Hawkinson disappeared after calling his family, possibly from Gacy's own home. He died of suffocation and was buried in the crawl space under the body of 17-year-old Rick Johnson, who went missing on August 6th. 2 more unidentified young males were thought to have been murdered between August and October of 1976. Their bodies also buried beneath the home. On October 24th, Gacy would double the stakes when he abducted 2 young men at the same time. Teenage friends Kenneth Parker and Michael Marino were last seen standing outside of a restaurant in Chicago. And unfortunately, that was also the last day either of the young men were ever seen alive. 2 days later, 19-year-old William Bundy would go missing after telling his family he was going to a party. He worked in construction and had done some jobs for Gacy. Bundy would die of suffocation like many of the other victims and would be buried beneath the master bedroom. Also, side note to this one, him and James Hawkinson were actually 2 prior unidentified victims. There was a point where about 9 victims that were buried in the house or under the crawl space remained unidentified up until about 2011 when they ran new DNA tests. And we'll get into that later. But William Bundy, whose picture is seen here, and James Hawkinson, who we saw before, were ones that were actually identified about 30 to 40 years later after the crimes were committed. So they were able to actually put names to the faces and give the families some kind of closure, which is always a good thing. So Bundy wasn't the only employee of Gacy's that would befall this tragic fate, unfortunately. The next victim, 17-year-old Gregory Godzik, enjoyed his job at PDM Contractors. Even though he'd only worked there for about 3 weeks, the money was good and allowed him to purchase parts to restore his 1966 Pontiac. He didn't even seem to mind the odd jobs that his boss would ask him to do, like cleaning and digging trenches for drain tiles under the crawl space of the home. On December 12, 1976, Godzik would drop off his girlfriend at her home after a date and would disappear into the night. His Pontiac, his prized possession, was later found abandoned miles away, but Gregory was nowhere to be found. His parents and older sister Eugenia contacted his employer, John Wayne Gacy, regarding Godzik's mysterious disappearance. Gacy claimed that the young man had run away after expressing him a desire to do so. He even claimed to have an answering machine message from Godzik shortly after his disappearance, stating his intention to leave town. When asked if he could replay the message for Gregory's concerned parents, Gacy claimed to have erased it. Around the same time, Gacy became a suspect in the disappearance of a 9-year-old boy, and Chicago police would again stake out Gacy's home. But sadly, yet again, they were unable to produce any evidence against Gacy, and the surveillance was dropped. The vigilance and police presence might have saved 19-year-old John Cizik's life, but sadly this was not to be. Gacy lured the young man to his home under the pretense of wanting to purchase Cizik's 1971 Plymouth Satellite. The youth would never be seen again, but interestingly, his vehicle would be. A short while after Cizik's disappearance, another teenager was spotted in the car, pulling away from a gas station without paying. Police would stop the youth, who turned out to be Gacy's roommate, Michael Rossi. Rossi claimed that Gacy had sold him the car for $300 and could explain everything. Gacy coolly confirmed Rossi's tale, stating that Cizik had sold Gacy the car, who then in turn sold it to Rossi. Police, however, failed to check the car's title. They only checked the VIN number, which had been signed by someone claiming to be John Cizik. But there were two problems with that story. One, the signature was clearly not John Cizik's, but a forgery. And two, the title had been signed by this person 18 days after Cizik went missing. Gacy would later confess to strangling the youth in the spare bedroom of his home. Sometime between December 1976 and March 1977, it is known that Gacy killed another unidentified adult male. The unknown victim was buried in the crawl space beneath 20-year-old missing Michigan native John Prestige, who was shortly before his disappearance mentioned that he had gotten a job with a local contractor. An additional unidentified youth was buried in the crawl space in spring or early summer of 1977, but the exact time frame of the murder remains unknown. On July 5th, Gacy would murder 19-year-old Matthew Bowman. Bowman's mother would last see her son at a suburban train station. The next time he would be seen was when his body was exhumed from beneath Gacy's home. By the time 1977 was winding down to a close, Gacy had only amped up his hunting, murdering 6 more young men between the ages of 16 and 21. The first of these was a bold choice, indeed for reasons that will immediately become obvious. Robert Gilroy was the 18-year-old son of a Chicago police sergeant and an avid outdoorsman. On September 15th, he was supposed to catch a bus with some friends to go horseback riding, but he never showed. He only lived 4 blocks from Gacy, and while an extensive search was mounted for the missing young man, to no avail, he was never found. He would be murdered like the others and buried in the growing mass grave beneath the home on Summerdale. There is a theory that Gacy had accomplices in the murders, a theory that Gacy himself gave as an alibi of sorts in later years, and his theory is supported solely by this standing piece of evidence in the Gilroy disappearance. Gacy had flown to Pittsburgh on September 12th to supervise a construction project and did not return until the 16th. This discrepancy in the timeline has yet to be explained. 10 days later, former Marine John Mowry would disappear after leaving his mother's home to walk back to his apartment. Gacy would admit to strangling Mowry and burying him beneath the bedroom. On October 17th, I think I timed it, there we go, 21-year-old Russell Nelson disappeared after being last seen outside of a bar. Nelson had been seeking work contracting, but instead, unfortunately, stumbled into the crosshairs of John Wayne Gacy. Nelson was murdered and buried beneath the guest bedroom. Less than 4 weeks later, Gacy would kidnap and murder 16-year-old Robert Winch, and he would join the others buried beneath the home. On November 18th, 20-year-old father of one, Tommy Bowling, would disappear after leaving a Chicago bar. 3 weeks after the murder of Bowling, on December 9th, 19-year-old Marine David Talsma would disappear after leaving home to attend a rock concert. He would be strangled to death with a ligature and buried beneath the bedroom near the body of the other Marine victim, John Mowry. Not one to end the year with a bang, or without a bang, I guess. Yeah, there's investigation needed. So we'll get to the house in a second. Like, we'll get to the house. Like, this was crazy. This was like, it was like murder buried under the house, murder buried under the house, murder buried under the house. And it was like, dude, I was like, what kind of fucking game of Tetris is this asshole playing right now? And how much room do you have in a, like, first of all, please beg my salty, sweet, caramel coated, crunchy fucking pardon. But I have never lived in a house with a crawl space. So maybe that's my bad. I've also never lived in a house with a basement. But how much fucking room do you have in a crawl space under a house? First of all, it's not big. It's a crawl space. So I imagine you have to crawl in it. It's not like a basement where you go downstairs and like you can stand up. You have to like army crawl in there. Can I please say that again? I believe it was what was it? Oh, dang it. Your salty, sweet, caramel, crunchy fucking pardon. So yeah, he would send people under there to dig out and to dig what he said were like drainage, like places for drainage or something, because he claimed that that it would flood under the house because of the sump pump. Again, I've never lived in a house with a sump pump either. But I'm like, first of all, this was a 2-bedroom home. So not a huge house. The crawl space under the home is only as big as the house's foundation. How many? I mean, yeah, you can dig down and like dig, but like we're talking about like this, like putting bodies in like this. And what kind of jigsaw fucking nonsense? I can't with this man. Yeah, and some of them will be buried on top of each other. So again, this was like Jenga in the worst way possible. I'm not here for it. So on September, so we've had murder. We've actually got a survivor on this next one, guys. And unfortunately, this is not the photo of the survivor here. I was unable to find a photo of this person who survived. I don't even know if this guy is actually still alive or not. But we'll play it and I'll pause it if we need to. So not one to end the year without a bang. Gacy would abduct 19-year-old Robert Donnelly from a bus stop at gunpoint. He drove Donnelly to his home where he would torture and rape Donnelly for hours, dunking his head repeatedly underwater in the bathtub until he passed out, and then he would wait for him to revive and continue to attack him. He would taunt his victim with statements like, "Aren't we playing fun games tonight?" Donnelly would incredibly survive the ordeal and reported later being in so much pain that night that he begged Gacy to kill him. We're going to go back. To which Gacy replied, "I'm getting round to it." For reasons unknown, after several hours of a living nightmare, Gacy would drive Donnelly to his workplace and release him with the warning that if he ever reported him, nobody would believe his story. So no one's really sure why he let Donnelly go. He's the first one that he let go. He did have that prior history of sexual assaults or attempted sexual assaults on prior roommates and other employees, but they all seemed to get away from him. Like the one guy got him into the handcuffs, and the other guy kicked him in the face. So he got away but why he would, it's still a question as to like, why let this one go out of all the other ones you previously killed. Who knows? So Donnelly decided to take his chances and reported the assault to police, regardless of what Gacy told him. Authorities would question Gacy on January 6, 1978. Gacy, practicing his innate talent for salesmanship, would admit to having a BDSM slave sex relationship with Donnelly, but claimed that all that had transpired between them was consensual, lies, And Donnelly only reported him because he didn't pay the kid the money he'd promised. Double fucking lies. The police believed Gacy. And no charges were filed. No charges were filed. The following month, he would murder 19-year-old William Kindred. That is his picture right there. Kindred disappeared on the 16th of February after telling his fiancée, who knew Gacy, that he was going to spend the evening at a bar. Kindred would be the last of Gacy's victims to be buried in the crawl space beneath the house. In March, Gacy would make another mistake that would lead his eventual capture. He's starting to get sloppy. 27-year-old Jeff Rignall would accuse Gacy of luring him to his vehicle by offering some pot before using chloroform to render him unconscious. Rignall then claimed that Gacy drove him to his home. His arms and his head would be locked into a pillory-like device and secured to the ceiling. Rignall then recalled being assaulted with various objects, including sex toys, lit candles, and whips. In later accounts, Rignall would also then claim that another man was in the room while the assault occurred, or that a light went on in the house. So he didn't think Gacy was alone in the home. Read Jeffrey Dahmer and Lover Spat. Exactly. This is also a picture of Jeff Rignall after the assault. So he would be continually drugged and subdued with chloroform before Gacy would drive him to Chicago's Lincoln Park, where he was dumped unconscious but alive. Rignall would regain consciousness and manage to stagger to his girlfriend's apartment for help. She would take him to the hospital, where he would spend 6 days recovering from his harrowing ordeal. He also sustained permanent damage from the chloroform, too. Did permanent damage to his liver. He was told after he woke up out of this haze. Yeah, and you can see he was beaten up pretty bad. Not to mention, sexually assaulted for hours by this lunatic. It's graphic. And he wrote a book later on. And also, this guy is brave as fuck, though. This guy right here, he is not alive anymore, unfortunately. I do believe he died in the early 2000s. But this motherfucker, he could have been I don't want to think about it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I survived it. I'm out. Nope, that is not what he did. So he was in the hospital and he recounted his story to police, who seemed skeptical because, somebody turns up half beaten up, burned with chloroform, anally bleeding, and, doubt it. What did this man need to do? He's in the hospital for 6 days. And you're I don't think that really happened. No. You did this to yourself. You're exaggerating. I'm oh my God. So they didn't initially issue an arrest warrant. So undeterred, Rignall was able to recall through the chloroform-induced haze of that violent night that Gacy had kidnapped him while driving a black Oldsmobile. Rignall and 2 friends would stake out exits off the expressway in an attempt to locate the car. So not only did he survive this ordeal, but he went looking for the fucker that did it to him. I also kind of wish that he would have just caught Gacy himself and handled his business. But you know what? We'll get there. So they didn't have any luck until April, when Rignall would finally spot Gacy's car. He and his friends would trail the car back to 8213 West Summerdale. And finally, with some proof in hand, authorities would issue an arrest warrant. Gacy would be charged with battery, a misdemeanor, and a civil suit would result from the case. A mere slap on the wrist for such a brutal attack that even Rignall himself claimed that Gacy did not seem entirely sane during, citing the beastly and animalistic ways in which he attacked me. The brush with the law didn't seem to deter Gacy one bit either. By 1978, there was no more room in the crawl space for any more bodies. Gacy would later glibly confess to police that he considered storing victims' bodies in the attic space, but was concerned about complications arising from leakage. Ugh. Instead, he went with the more practical route of disposing bodies into the Des Plaines River off the I-55 bridge. He would claim that he disposed 5 of 5 bodies this way, but only 4 were ever found. And I don't have a picture of this one either, actually. I might have put him in out of order. I don't think I uploaded his picture. Oops. I'm missing another one. These were a lot of victim pictures to go through, guys. It was real depressing. So the first victim thrown from the I-55 bridge was 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke. He was murdered in mid-June after leaving his apartment to purchase cigarettes. Shortly before his disappearance, O'Rourke had told his roommate that a contractor on the Northwest Side had offered him a job. On November 4th, Gacy killed 19-year-old Frank Landingen. His naked body was found in the Des Plaines River on November 12th. On November 24th, a 20-year-old James Mazzara disappeared after sharing Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Mazzara had informed his sister the day before his disappearance he was working in the construction industry and doing all right. He was last seen alive walking in the direction of Bughouse Square, carrying a suitcase. But time was running out quickly for John Wayne Gacy, and it would be the disappearance of his final victim, Robert Piest, that would draw the eye of the police to a small suburban Chicago home and shock and horrify the nation. On December 11th, at around 9:00 p.m., 15-year-old Robert Piest, an honor student at Maine West High School, prepared to end his shift at Nissen Pharmacy. It was his poor luck that at the same time, John Wayne Gacy was also at Nissen's to discuss a potential remodeling deal with the store owner. Gacy mentioned within earshot of Piest that his contracting firm often hired young men for labor starting at $5 an hour. $5 an hour. Guys, the 70s were crazy. The 70s were fucking crazy. $5 an hour. And get this, that's not even the gem. That's not even the carrot at the center of the fucking shrubbery maze. No. That was twice what Piest was making at his job at the pharmacy. So he was making $2.50 an hour? What kind of inflation? I can't. Hold on. So, kind of can't blame the kid for he says he hires young people. It's twice what I'm making right now. Okay. So his mother arrived at the store after his shift to pick him up in order to drive him home to celebrate her 46th birthday with their family. But Robert would ask his mother to wait, adding that some contractor wants to talk to me about a job. He promised to return shortly. It was the last time that Elizabeth Piest would see her son. Robert Piest would be murdered at around 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. He would later state that while at the home, he inquired of the young man if there was anything he wouldn't do for the right price, to which Piest responded, innocently enough, that he didn't mind working hard. But manual labor wasn't what John Wayne Gacy had in mind. Gacy then reportedly told Piest that good money could be made by hustling, but Piest seemed dismissive. Gacy then went into his bag of deadly tricks for his old standby, the magic handcuffs trick. He would dupe Robert Piest into a pair of handcuffs under the guise of a magic trick. Like he would later admit to doing to many other victims, Gacy would subdue his prey by asking them if they wanted to see a magic trick, to which he would produce a pair of trick handcuffs and put them on his own wrists, and then show them how to get out of them. He would then place the handcuffs on his victim, inviting them to get out of them and do the same. Unfortunately, in the interim, Gacy would switch the trick cuffs for real ones, and then snapping them on his victim's wrists, leaving them no means for escape. He then told Robert Piest, quote, "I'm going to rape you, and you can't do anything about it," unquote. Piest began to cry. I'm sorry, you guys. My fucking neighbors are assholes. But this one, there were so many victims and so many faces I looked at for this one. This one was just I had to stop doing the notes here at this point and take a break because it was so sad. They're all sad, but this one just hit hard. This one hit hard because I know that kid was terrified. They were all scared, but Jesus, fucking Jesus. So he would assault Piest and then use yet another one of his sick inventions, a tourniquet known as the rope trick, which we will see a picture of later, to strangle Piest. Gacy stated that when he placed the device around the boy's neck that he was scared and crying. He recalled even receiving a phone call from a business associate that he coldly took while Piest lay suffocating on his bedroom floor. Meanwhile, Piest's mother, Elizabeth, had become alarmed when her son had not returned. She returned home and then came back to the store with her husband and her children to search for Robert, but to no avail. They couldn't find any trace of him. They would file a missing persons report later that night at around 11:29 p.m. Lieutenant Joseph Kozenczek, whose son attended the same high school as the missing boy, insisted on an in-depth investigation. He turned to the owner of Nissens, who reported Gacy as the likely contractor mentioned by Robert Piest before his disappearance. After having spoken with Piest's mother the following morning, December 12th, Kozenczek was convinced that the youth had not run away, and on a routine check of criminal charges and records on Gacy, it was revealed that he had an outstanding battery charge against him in Chicago for his attack on Jeff Rignall, and that he had also served a prison sentence in Iowa for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. Gacy was then asked by the police to come in for questioning. Gacy promised to come to the station later that evening to make a statement confirming that he had seen two youths at the store and that one of them could have been Robert Piest, but he insisted on never offering him a job. He then indicated he was unable to come to the station for questioning at that moment because his uncle had just died. When questioned to how soon he could come to the police station, he responded, quote, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" Unquote. This motherfucker, excuse me, on behalf of the council, this motherfucker. The lion, the witch, and the audacity of this bitch right here. I can't. No. Just, you're canceled. No. And what gets me is that, like, because obviously he's not under arrest at that point. They just want him to come in for questioning, but, like, still. So finally, at 11 p.m. on the 12th, Gacy called Kozenczek back and said, quote, "You still want to talk to me?" "Yeah," Kozenczek responds. "How long do you think it will take you to get here?" "A half an hour," Gacy said. Kozenczek waited until about 1 a.m., but Gacy never showed. Police later learned that after the phone call, Gacy goes to his attic, takes the body of Robert Piest, and moves it to the trunk of his car. He drives south and dumps the body in the Des Plaines River. At 3:20 a.m., Gacy arrived at the police station covered in mud and claiming that he had been involved in a car accident, which I guess he actually really was. On returning to the police station later that day, because he was told to leave and come back, Gacy denied any involvement in Piest's disappearance and repeated that he had not offered him a job. When asked why he had returned to the pharmacy because they heard that he'd come back, Gacy reiterated that he had done so in response to a phone call from the store owner informing them he had left his appointment book there. Detectives had already spoken to the owner, who denied calling Gacy. At the request of detectives, Gacy prepared a written statement detailing his movements on December 11th. And people were finally becoming suspicious of John Wayne Gacy, and the net around him was slowly starting to close. At this point, though, authorities suspected that Piest might still be alive but being held captive in the home against his will. Police then obtained a search warrant on December 13th to search the home on Summerdale. The initial search of the property turned up a wide variety of suspicious items, including several police badges and a 6mm Brevettata starter pistol inside an office drawer, a hypodermic needle inside a cabinet in Gacy's bathroom. Investigators also found handcuffs, books on homosexuality and pederasty, 7 pornographic films, capsules of amyl nitrate, and an 18-inch dildo in Gacy's bedroom. A 39-inch piece of wood with 2 holes drilled into each end, and bottles of Valium and atropine. Also, several driver's licenses were found in the northwest bedroom. We'll revisit this in just one second. A blue hooded parka was found atop a toolbox inside the laundry room, and underwear too small to fit Gacy was located inside of a bathroom closet. In the northwest bedroom, investigators found a class of 1975 Maine West High School ring engraved with the initials JAS. Investigators also recovered a Nissen Pharmacy photo receipt from a trash can along a 36-inch section of nylon rope. The Des Plaines police confiscated Gacy's Oldsmobile and other PDM work vehicles. Police signed 2 two-man surveillance teams to monitor Gacy on a 12-hour rotational basis as they continued their investigation into his background and potential involvement in Piest's disappearance. The surveillance teams consisted of officers Mike Albrecht and David Hockmeister and Ronald Robinson and Robert Schultz. The following day, investigators received a phone call from Gacy's housemate and employee, Michael Rossi, who informed the investigators of Gregory Godzick's disappearance and the fact that another PDM employee, Charles Hatula, had been found drowned in an Illinois river earlier that year. On December 15th, Des Plaines investigators obtained further details of Gacy's battery charge, learning that the complainant, Jeffrey Rignall, had reported that Gacy had lured him to the car, then chloroformed, raped, and tortured him before dumping him with severe chest and facial burns and rectal bleeding in Lincoln Park the next morning. In an interview with Gacy's former wife the same day, they learned of the disappearance of John Butkovich. The same day, the Maine West High School ring was traced to the missing John Allen Cizik. So the things are starting to fall into place. The stuff is starting to line up. By December 16th, Gacy was becoming affable with the surveillance detectives, regularly inviting them to join him for meals in restaurants with him, to eat with him, and occasionally for drinks in bars or at his home. He repeatedly denied that he had anything to do with Peace's disappearance and accused the officers of harassing him because of his political connections or because of his recreational drug use. That afternoon, former PDM employee David Cram consented to a police interview. In what she described Gacy's hardworking lifestyle and open-minded attitude regarding sex between men, Cram also revealed that because of his poor timekeeping, Gacy had once given him a watch, explaining to him that he had gotten it from a dead person. And you still... So watch? Okay. I've never been that desperate for a gift. Ever. In my life. If somebody handed me something and they were like, I got this from a dead person, I'd be like, I mean, it's a nice watch, but like, God, do you know this dead person? Like, I have questions. I have follow-up questions. Investigators conducted a formal interview of Michael Rossi on December 17th. He informed them that Gacy had sold Cizik's vehicle to him, like he said before, explaining that he had bought the car because Cizik needed the money to move to California. A further examination of Gacy's Oldsmobile was conducted on this date. In the course of examining the trunk of the car, investigators discovered small clusters of fibers, which may have been human hair. Forensics weren't really super great at that point, but it could have been hair. That evening, officers also conducted a test using 3 trained police cadaver dogs to determine whether Peace had been present in any of Gacy's vehicles. One dog approached Gacy's Oldsmobile and lay on the passenger seat, and what the dog handlers informed investigators was a death reaction, indicating that Peace's body had indeed been present in the vehicle. That evening, Gacy invited detectives Albrecht and Hockmeister to a restaurant for a meal. In the early hours of December 18th, he invited them to another restaurant where over breakfast he talked of his business, his marriages, and his activities as a registered clown. At one point during the conversation, Gacy remarked, quote, "You know, clowns can get away with murder," unquote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, excuse the ever-loving Kentucky Fried fuck out of me, is why I hate clowns. Nope. It's a nope for me, dog. So by this time, the stress and constant surveillance was actually starting to show on Gacy. He was unshaven, nervous, and drinking heavily. He even attempted to instigate a civil lawsuit against the Des Plaines Police Department, demanding that they cease their surveillance. The same day, a serial number on the photo receipt from Nisson's Pharmacy that was found in Gacy's kitchen trash was tied to 17-year-old Kim Byers, a co-worker of Peace from the store. She said she had worn the blue hooded parka that was also found in Gacy's home to work that day and had given it to Robert Peace to wear when he left the store that night to go meet with the contractor who was offering him a job. The statement contradicted the many previous statements from Gacy, who insisted that he had no contact with Peace whatsoever. Fucking liar. You fucking liar. That same evening, Rossi was interviewed a second time. This time, he was a little bit more cooperative. He informed detectives that in the summer of 1977, at Gacy's behest, he had spread 10 bags of lime in the crawl space of Gacy's home in order to get rid of a weird smell. A weird smell, you guys. A weird fucking smell. So, in this slide right here is a sketch that Gacy actually made himself on the back of a form at the police department of the crawl space and where the graves were in the crawl space of the home. So that is drawn by John Wayne Gacy himself. It's not as eye-catching as the altar that Jeffrey Dahmer drew a picture of that had 13 skulls on it, but you know, the guy's not an artist. It's not an artist by any means. I guess I can't critique it too hard. I'm gonna, but I you know. So on December 19th, investigators began compiling evidence for a second search warrant for Gacy's home. While flushing Gacy's toilet, the officer noticed a smell he suspected could be that of a rotting corpse emanating from a heating duct. The officers who'd searched Gacy's house previously had failed to notice this. The house had been cold. The heat kicked on, which then, of course, stirred up any kind of nasty smells. So they were like, that smells wrong. But at the same time, in the neighborhood, too, people had already been complaining about a smell coming from the house. And he kept trying to, like, they were like, no, I'm pretty sure it's coming from that house on Summerdale. Pretty sure it's coming from your house. And he was like, and Gacy always had, like, an explanation for it. He always had, like, oh, like, I have a rat problem. And, like, I had some, like, rats die under there. Oh, the sump pump flooded it and it's just mold smell. So he always tried to, like, discount, but, like, even neighbors had been complaining about the smell for obvious reasons. Like, you have this many bodies buried under your house that are just rotting and putrefying. It's not going to smell great. I don't care how many fucking Glade plugins you put in there. It's not going to cover a dead body smell. John, if that is your real name, which it is, but fuck you. So they didn't notice the smell the first time. Now that they noticed it, the investigators went back and interviewed Cram and Rossi again on the 20th. Rossi had agreed to be interviewed in his relation to possible links with John Cizik, as well as the disappearance of Robert Piest. When questioned by Kozenchek as to whether he believed Gacy had concealed Piest's body, Rossi replied that Gacy may have placed the body in the crawl space, adding that he thought Cizik's car was also stolen. Rossi agreed to submit to a polygraph test, and he denied any involvement in Piest's disappearance and murder. Cram informed investigators of Gacy's attempt to rape him in 1976, and when asked whether he'd been down to the crawl space, Cram replied that he'd been once asked by Gacy to spread lime down there also, and that he had also dug trenches, which Gacy explained were for drainage pipes. Sure, John. Sure, John. Cram stated that these trenches were 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 2 feet deep. The size of graves. So not the size of pipes. Got it. I'd be like, these are weird pipes, John. What kind of pipes are fucking 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and why, John? I have questions. On behalf of the council, questions, sir, for you. On the evening of December 20th, Gacy drove to his lawyer's house to attend a scheduled meeting, ostensibly to discuss the progress of his civil suit against the police for following him around. On his arrival, Gacy appeared disheveled and immediately asked for a drink, whereupon Sam Amarante fetched a bottle of whiskey from his car. On his return, Amarante asked Gacy with what he had to discuss with them. Gacy had picked up a copy of the Daily Herald from Amarante's desk, pointed to a front page article covering the disappearance of Robert Piest, and said, quote, "This boy is dead. He's in a river," unquote. That sounds like a motherfucking confession to me. Bitches. Excuse me. Excuse the ever-loving fuck out of me. Gacy then proceeded to launch into a rambling confession that ran into the early hours of the following morning. He began informing Amarante and Stevens that he had, quote, been the judge, jury, and executioner of many, many people, and that now he wanted to be the same for himself. He said he buried most of the victims in his crawl space and had disposed of 5 other bodies in the Des Plaines River. Gacy dismissed his victims as male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars, to whom he gave the rope trick, adding that he sometimes awoke to find dead, strangled kids on his floor with their hands cuffed behind their back. He had buried bodies in the crawl space as he believed they were his property. Ugh. As a result of the alcohol he consumed, Gacy fell asleep midway through his confession. Amarante immediately arranged for a psychiatric appointment for Gacy at 9 a.m. the following morning. On awakening several hours later, Gacy shook his head when informed by Amarante that he had confessed to killing approximately 30 people. Gacy responded by saying, "Well, I can't think about that right now. I've got things to do." Ignoring his lawyer's advice regarding his scheduled appointment, Gacy left their office to attend to the needs of his business. Gacy later recollected that the memories of his final day of freedom being hazy, adding he knew his arrest was inevitable and that he intended to visit his friends and his family to say his final farewells. Gacy then drove to the home of fellow contractor and friend Ronald Rode. Gacy hugged Rode before bursting into tears, saying, quote, "I've been a bad boy. I killed 30 people, give or take a few." Give or take a few? Give or take... Give or take a few. Mother... Woosah. Okay. So you run... Okay. There's a lot to unpack in this right now. The fact that you ran up on your friend, and that is the first thing you say to him, is that you hug him and tell him, I've been a bad boy. I killed 30 people. I'm sorry. If my friend, I don't care who they are, rolls up on me, just run up on me with that confession, they're rolling back because I'm going to knock them on their fucking ass. No. First of all, yet a bad boy is the understatement of the century. Excuse me. Excuse the fuck out of me. But can you imagine this guy's reaction? Like, you ran up on your friend and confessed to murdering 30 people and then bounce. What? And the fact that you don't know the exact number, you're like, I don't know, it was around 30. Okay, gotta go. Bye. See you later. Like, why? Why? First of all, how dare you? And why? And no. So then he left his friend's house and drove to Cram's home to meet with Cram and Rossi. As he drove along the expressway, the surveillance officers noted that he was holding a rosary to his chin, praying while he drove. After talking with Cram and Rossi, Gacy had Cram drive him to a scheduled meeting with lawyer Leroy Stevens. Gacy then had Cram drive him to Maryhill Cemetery, where his father was buried. At this point, they were concerned that Gacy was going to kill himself, so they were like, we need to go arrest him now because we don't want to lose this guy. So they arrest him. They detain him. And armed with the second signed search warrant, police and evidence technicians drove to Gacy's home. On their arrival, officers found that Gacy had unplugged the sump pump, flooding the crawl space with water in some sort of juvenile attempt, I guess, to cover the mess that was down there. So to clear it, they simply replaced the plug and waited for the water to drain. After it had done so, evidence technician Daniel Genty entered the 28 by 38 foot crawl space, crawled to the southwest area and began digging. Within minutes, he had discovered rotting flesh and a human arm bone. Genty had immediately shouted to the investigators that they could charge Gacy with murder, adding, quote, I think this place is full of kids, unquote. A police photographer then dug in the northeastern corner of the crawl space, uncovering a kneecap. The two then began digging in the southeast corner, uncovering 2 lower leg bones. The victims were too decomposed to be pieced, who had only recently disappeared. As the body discovered in the northeast corner was later unearthed, a crime scene technician discovered the skull of a second victim alongside the body. Later excavations of the feet of the second victim revealed a further skull beneath this body. So because of this, later excavations, technicians returned to the trench where the first body was unearthed, discovering a ribcage of a fourth victim within the crawl space, confirming the scale of the murders. So these are actual pictures of the crawl space when it was found. As you can see, the numbers are indicating they didn't have names at this point. They had numbers. So as they would find one, they would put a stake in there with a number on it. And we're just trying to get a count at this point. After being informed by the police that they had found human remains in his crawl space and that he would now face murder charges, shocker, Gacy told officers he wanted to clear the air, adding that he had known his arrest was inevitable since the previous evening when he had spent on the couch on his lawyer's office and basically spilled his guts. In the morning hours of December 22nd, and in the presence of his lawyers, Gacy provided a formal statement in which he confessed to murdering approximately 30 young males, all of whom he claimed entered his house willingly. Some victims were referred to by name, but Gacy did not claim to not know or remember most of the names. He claimed that they were all teenage male runaways or male prostitutes, the majority of whom he had buried in the crawl space. Gacy claimed to have only dug 5 of the victims' graves himself in this location and had his employees, including Gregory Godzik, dig the remaining trenches so he would just have graves available. Quotes. In January 1979, he had planned to conceal the corpses even further by covering the entire crawl space with concrete. After the remains of the victims were recovered from the home, the infamous and now vacant home was demolished in April 1979. Ultimately, 26 bodies would be recovered from beneath the House of Horror on Summerdale, and the home would be ultimately demolished. There was it sat empty for a very long time. That is the lot that it sat on. And then a new home was built on it, which I do believe last I had seen was for sale. It's like $400,000 or something like that. The next slide has that. So that's the new house that was built on it. That's the photo of them taking bodies out of the original house. So you want haunted houses, y'all? That's how you get them. That's how you fucking get them. How many times do I gotta say it? You plant ghost seeds, you get ghosts. Four bodies would also be recovered from the Des Plaines River, including that of final victim Robert Peast, who ultimately led to Gacy's capture. Most of the victims had either died of ligature strangulation or suffocation by a foreign object shoved down their throats, sometimes their own socks or underwear. The head and upper torso of several bodies unearthed beneath Gacy's property had been placed into plastic bags. Several were also found with a rope still around their necks. In some cases, bodies were found with foreign objects such as prescription bottles lodged in the pelvic region, the position of which indicated that the items had been thrust into the victim's rectal cavity. I would think you would have to tell somebody when you bought that house that it's sitting on the lot that Gacy's house was sitting on and there were bodies buried beneath it. So that is the rope trick right there, you guys. That is a photo of a rope that was found in the home. And that is the rope trick that apparently he would do on his victims and strangle them. Because, you know, rope trick makes it sound so much nicer than a fucking garrote. Ugh. So Gacy was brought to trial on February 6, 1980, and charged with 33 murders. At the request of his defense counsel, Gacy spent over 300 hours with doctors at Menard Correctional Center in the year before his trial. He underwent a variety of psychological tests before a panel of psychiatrists to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Gacy attempted to convince the doctors that he suffered from multiple personality disorder. He claimed to have 4 personalities: the hardworking, civic-minded contractor, the clown, the active politician, and a policeman called Jack Hanley, whom he referred to as Bad Jack. Okay, hold on. Excuse me. Bad Jack. Bad Jack, that's the best you got, John. That's the best you got. You're accused of killing 33 people, 26 of which they found in your own home, and your best defense is, I have multiple personalities. One of them's a rogue cop, goes by Bad Jack. What? What kind of hinkery-dinkery nonsense is that? Excuse me. No. No. When Gacy had confessed to police, he claimed to be relaying the crimes of Jack, who detested homosexuality and viewed male prostitutes as weak, stupid, degraded scum. His lawyers opted to have Gacy plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges against him. 3 psychiatric experts at Gacy's trial testified that they found him to be a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personality disorder. Convenient. How convenient. The prosecutors presented the case that Gacy was sane and in full control of his actions. To support the contention, they produced several witnesses to testify to the premeditation of Gacy's actions and the efforts he took to escape detection. Those doctors refuted the defense doctors' claims of multiple personalities and insanity. Cram and Rossi testified that Gacy had made them dig drainage ditches and spread bags of lime in the crawl space. Both had said that Gacy looked periodically into the crawl space to ensure that they and other employees did as they were supervised and did not deviate from the precise locations that he marked. After 5 weeks of testimony and an attempted claim at a mistrial from Gacy himself, both sides rested and went into their closing arguments. After the state's 4-hour closing, counsel Sam Amarante spoke for the defense. Amarante argued against the testimony delivered by the doctors who had testified for the prosecution, repeatedly citing the testimony of their 4 psychiatrists and psychologists who testified on behalf of the defense. The defense lawyer attempted to portray Gacy as a man driven by compulsions he was unable to control, contending that the state had not met their burden of proof that Gacy was sane beyond a reasonable doubt. In support of these arguments, the defense referred to the testimony of the doctors who had appeared for the defense, in addition to defense witnesses such as Jeffrey Rignall and a former business associate of Gacy's, both who testified to their belief that Gacy had been unable to control his actions. Amarante then urged the jury to put aside any prejudice that they held for their client and asked that the jury deliver a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. adding that Gacy was a danger to both himself and to others, and that studying his psychology and behavior would be a benefit to science. On the morning of March 12th, William Kunkel continued to argue for the prosecution. Kunkel referred to the defense's contention of insanity as a sham, arguing that the facts of the case demonstrated Gacy's ability to think logically and control his actions. Kunkel also referred to the testimony of one of the doctors who had examined Gacy in 1968 and concluded he was an antisocial personality, capable of committing crimes without remorse and unlikely to benefit from any social or psychiatric treatment, stating that recommendations of this doctor, had they been heeded, Gacy would not have been freed. And probably shouldn't have been. Could have stopped this whole mess before it started. At the close of the argument, Kunkel removed photos of Gacy's 22 identified victims from a display board and asked the jury not to show sympathy, but to show justice. Kunkel then asked the jury to, quote, show the same sympathy this man showed when he took these lives and put them there, quote, unquote, before throwing the stack of photos into the opening of the trap door from Gacy's crawl space, which had been introduced into evidence and was on display in the courtroom. After Kunkel finished his testimony, the jury retired to consider their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, and Gacy was found guilty of 33 charges of murder. He was also found guilty of sexual assault and taking indecent liberties with a child, both convictions in reference to Robert Piest. At the time, his conviction for 33 murders was the most for which any person in U.S. history had ever been convicted. In the sentencing portion of the trial, the jury deliberated for more than 2 hours before sentencing Gacy to death for each murder committed after the Illinois statute on capital punishment came into effect in June 1977. His execution was originally set for June 2nd, 1980. On being sentenced, Gacy was transferred to the Menard Correctional Center, where he remained on death row for 14 years through different pending appeals, until time and the legal process finally ran out for Gacy, and a final execution date was set for May 10th, 1994. Excuse me, burp. On the morning of May 9th, 1994, Gacy was transferred from the Menard Correctional Center to Stateville Correctional Center to be executed. That afternoon, he was allowed a private picnic on the prison grounds with family. For his last meal, Gacy ordered a bucket of KFC, a dozen fried shrimp, French fries, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. That evening, he observed prayer with a Catholic priest before being escorted to the Stateville execution chamber to receive a lethal injection. Before the execution began, the chemicals that were used to effect the execution solidified unexpectedly, clogging the IV tube used to administer the chemicals into Gacy's arm, complicating the procedure. The blinds covering the window through which witnesses observed the execution were drawn. The execution team replaced the clogged tube, and after 10 minutes, the blinds were reopened and the execution resumed. The entire process took 18 minutes. Anesthesiologists blamed the problem on prison officials' inexperience conducting an execution, saying that had correction execution procedures been followed, the complications would never have occurred. The error apparently led to Illinois adopting an alternative method of lethal injection. On this subject, one prosecutor at Gacy's trial, William Kunkel, said, quote, he got a much easier death than any of his victims. Yeah, his lawyers tried to complain that it was cruel and unusual, and he suffered excruciatingly. I was like, yeah, cry me a river, bitch. I don't feel bad. According to published reports, Gacy was a diagnosed sociopath who did not express any remorse for his crimes. His final statement to his lawyer before his execution was that killing him would not compensate for the loss of others and that the state was murdering him. His final spoken words were reported to be, quote, kiss my ass, unquote. A pleasant individual. After Gacy's death was confirmed at 12:58 a.m. on May 10th, 1994, his brain was removed. It is in the possession of Helen Morrison, who you see in this photo right here, with somebody else that you guys might know. A witness for the defense at Gacy's trial who has interviewed Gacy and other serial killers in an attempt to isolate common personality traits of violent sociopaths. Those are actually exhibits at the Haunted Museum. There is the original fucking creepy ass feral forest clown painting. There's 2 of them. There's a photo of Gacy. So those are some of his original artwork in the back. And there is a piece of his brain that is on display at the Haunted Museum. So he purchased a piece of John Wayne Gacy's brain to be displayed at the Haunted Museum. And there it is right there. Yeah. There's more underneath. So like on the next shelf, there's a few books. There's a couple letters from Gacy, some more paintings of his. Yeah, it's pretty gross. It's pretty gross. I got to see it up close and personal. It's pretty gross. It's just, I was like, Clowns. Again, clowns, not my favorite. Did not need to see this in my face right here in my face. No. But yeah. Gross. His body was cremated, and only 27 of Gacy's victims were ever conclusively identified. Of these, the youngest were Samuel Stapleton and Michael Marino, both 14. The oldest was Russell Nelson, who was 21. To this day, 6 victims have still remained unidentified. In October 2011, Cook County Sheriff Thomas Dart announced that investigators, having obtained full DNA profiles from each of the unidentified victims, were going to renew their efforts to identify them. After a press conference held to announce this, sorry, I'm looking for the button here, Sheriff Dart stated that investigators were actively seeking DNA samples from individuals across the United States related to any male missing between 1970 and 1979. Results of tests conducted thus far have confirmed the identification of 2 victims who we saw earlier, James Hawkinson and William Bundy, but ruled out the possibility of other missing youths as being victims of Gacy, and solved 4 unrelated cold cases dating between 1972 and 1979. In November 2011, the victim, previously known as Body 19, was identified through DNA testing as William Bundy. Shortly after Gacy's arrest, Bundy's family had contacted his dentist in the hope that submitting dental records for comparison with the unidentified bodies, but the records had been destroyed after the dentist retired. The most recent victim to be identified is 16-year-old James Hawkinson, previously known as Body 24. He was identified in July 2017 using DNA testing. At the time of Gacy's arrest, he claimed to both Des Plaines and Chicago investigators that the total number of victims could be as high as 45. However, only 33 were ever linked to Gacy. Investigators excavated the grounds of the property until they had exposed the substratum of clay beneath the foundations, finding 29 bodies. Gacy said that after he had assaulted and then released Jeffrey Rignall in March 1978, he began to throw his murder victims in the Des Plaines River. He confessed to having disposed of 5 bodies in this manner, but only 4 were ever actually discovered and linked to him. When asked if they were more victims, Gacy stated, quote, in a cagey kind of way, "That's for you guys to find out." The question remains if Gacy acted alone in his killings. It does seem to be a standing point of contention and a new theory that's popped up recently. A matter brought up by Gacy himself, who claimed to have direct help from several accomplices during his murder spree. No direct evidence outside of some discrepancies in Gacy's travel timelines and the testimony of survivor Jeff Rignall has ever really been produced. Was it possible that Gacy had accomplices who obtained victims for him? Some seem to think so. The correlations definitely look suspicious, but unfortunately there is no definitive evidence to link anyone else to the killings besides John Wayne Gacy. His own defense attorney, Sam Amarante, denies such allegations, claiming that Gacy confessed everything to him initially before trial, admitting to the guilt in all the killings, and it was only later, after he was incarcerated and awaiting the death penalty, that the story suddenly began to change. Side notes I thought that were of interest. So these are the paintings. So this is some stuff he used to sell. Isolated in his prison cell, Gacy began to paint. The subjects he chose were varied, from birds to skulls and even other murderers. Many were clowns. I'm not doing another clown portrait, you guys. Including himself as Pogo or Patches. His Hi-Ho series, which we saw in the Haunted Museum slide that you could see the dwarfs, includes scenes from the 7 Dwarfs. Although Gacy was permitted to earn money from the sale of his paintings until 1985, he claimed his artwork was intended to bring joy into people's lives. I can't with this man. I cannot. Many of Gacy's paintings have been displayed at exhibitions, and others have been sold at various auctions, with individual prices ranging from $200,000 to $20,000. Following Gacy's execution, family members of his victims publicly burned several of the paintings, and this is called Sex Skull for anybody that was interested in what this beautiful piece is called. There are penises in the eye of that skull. That is not where a penis should be. I have to question this man's grasp on anatomy at this point. Just throwing that out there. Also, as another interesting little nugget of trivia that came out of the research from this, in 1984, Sam Amarante, who was one of Gacy's 2 defense attorneys at his 1980 trial, authored procedures that were incorporated by the Illinois General Assembly into the Missing Child Recovery Act of 1984. Amarante has since said the primary inspiration for this legislation was that at the time of the Gacy murders, Illinois police had to wait 72 hours before initiating a search for a missing child or an adolescent. the Illinois Missing Child Recovery Act of 1984 did remove that 72-hour waiting period. I can't imagine having to wait 3 days to report your child missing. Like, as a parent, that must be some sort of private fucking hell. So they did eventually remove that. Other states across America subsequently adopted similar procedures. As a result, a national network aimed at locating missing children was gradually formed. This has since developed into the child abduction emergency, commonly known today as the Amber Alert. So the Amber Alert kind of came out of the John Wayne Gacy case. So something good did come out of it, I guess, in the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, the guy was put to death in 1994.
As lovable and jokeable as I was back then. I don't sit around worrying about the death penalty or things like that now.
How could you not?
If you believe you've lived your life the right way, then you do not have nothing to fear in my case.
Yeah, I'm worried about fixing God.
No. I'm fairly comfortable with him. I've been at the Catholic services. I'm the server for the priest for the last 10 years. I have no qualms about doing that. I've had confession, I have communion, and I am at peace with myself.
Well, I'm glad you are, John, because the rest of us sincerely hope you're burning somewhere in the eternal tire fires of hell. So, and good riddance to you. That one was rough, you guys. That one was a lot. It's just the eyes are empty. Just like most sociopaths, the eyes were empty. So did you guys have any questions specifically regarding this episode? Sorry, I had to kind of pause the video a couple times. It was kind of, the timing was a little, I'm still working on like getting the timing down as to like me talking and pacing my talking. Salvador Dali did a similar piece of art. Was a photo of the naked women in the shape of a skull, but I'm pretty sure his didn't have dicks in the eye. So why are you watching that at 4 a.m., Amina? You're going to have nightmares about killer clowns. Not that regular clowns aren't already nightmarish pieces of, just pure nightmare fuel, but the fact that, no. Yes, thank you. This was a lot of research for this one because there were so many victims. There were 33 in total, which Bundy had 36, but there were so many that I wanted to highlight each one of them, and I wanted to give them each a spotlight, to be recognized, because the reason that I'm alternately fascinated by serial killers and the fact that I wonder what goes wrong in the human brain that would cause a person to become a predator of that level, and where that happens. But I also want to draw attention to the real stars of the crime. I don't care for the rock star kind of images that are given to serial killers, because to me they're just predatory cowards. So I want the spotlight to be brought back to the victims and to put names to faces, because often they're the lost ones in the story. They're the ones that get lost in the media of the killer themselves. The killer ends up the one that's the headline. They end up the one that's the famous one, unfortunately. And the faces of the victims, unfortunately, do get forgotten. So I wanted to make sure that these 30 young men that I could find photos of got to be seen. So that's important. Yeah, why do they think that they turn religious? Hold on, let me put that up there. So question, why do they all think that if they turn religious, they will be forgiven? Well, apparently that's what Christianity says, is that it doesn't matter what you've done. As long as you turn to Jesus in your final moments, I guess, that you just automatic pass to heaven. And I'm not going to talk on religion because that is not this kind of show. However, I do feel like that's a sticking point for me, where I'm like, no, there has to be something like bad enough that you have to be punished for. I feel like that's just, it's counterintuitive. Like, there has to be something that you do that is horrible enough to warrant some sort of punishment. There's not like a get out of jail free card. I feel like that's a cheat to the system, but what do I know? A life hack. Apparently adopt Jesus as your savior and you just get to go right to heaven. Free pass. Get out of jail free card. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I guess I'm going straight to hell. I'm driving the bus if y'all want to jump on. Just boop, boop. Stop by all your houses and be like, you're going to be like, why is this bus that's painted in flames outside of my house? And I'm just going to lean out the door and be like, you bitch, you knew what this was. Hong Kong, get on. Get your shit. We going. I said I was coming back. Beep, beep, bitch, get on the bus. We're all going. And this stuff, I'm sorry. This is, I still cannot taste the alcohol in this. Danger zone. Highway to the danger zone, you guys. So next week, we're going back to paranormal. So we're kind of doing alternating weeks just because trying to do 2 shows a week was a lot. So the amount of research that I do and the amount of like intricacies that I get into take a lot of time. So it was not leaving me a whole lot of time for like to take care of like stuff myself in my personal life. So I'm shifting back to doing Wednesdays to watch SpongeBob. Yeah, watch a palate cleanser, you guys, after this one. Like a cartoon, like something Disney or something like cheerful and nice. Watch cat videos on the internet because I feel like this needs a palate cleanser after this one. I was like, I just feel gross. But next week will be we're back to interviews with paranormal investigators, and we actually have Ghost Club Paranormal. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's a female investigator that is based out of California, and she goes around to a lot of really cool places. So she will be on the show on the first Wednesday in February at 6:00. Be here or be square, as the saying goes. So yeah, back to the normal, back to the time again. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for listening to me talk about murderers, I guess, and and the garbage humans that they are. I would say also, if you guys haven't watched the Night Stalker series on Netflix, it's really good. It's really well done. There's another documentary on there that's about Richard Ramirez that I've been meaning to get around to watching after watching the Night Stalker one. So if you haven't seen that, go watch it. It's really good. He's one that I'm like kind of interested to like learn because I don't really know anything about his backstory. Like I know the backstory of a lot of the other ones, but Richard Ramirez, I didn't really ever research and look into. Totally. Yeah, exactly. Like looking in the bushes, like, you in there? Who's hiding in there? Garbage humans, yes. That is very true. So if anyone has any other questions, I think we will wrap it up at this point. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me. Team Rewatch, if you didn't get the whole episode, there is a lot of details. And again, you may want to watch something nice and cheerful after this because it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, Ramirez was terrifying just because he had no pattern. Like like anybody under the sun could be a victim. He didn't have like a type. Like Gacy had a type, Bundy had a type. Ramirez was just all over the map. There was no rhyme or reason. Yes, bring snacks. Bring snacks. Thank you guys. So I hope you guys liked the new intro. It was pretty cool. So let me know what you think of that. And then the music on there is actually by me. So if you like the music, I wrote the music also. So just a triple threat. Look at that. I know it's not twerkable anymore, guys, but it's pretty, it's somebody said American Horror Story, and I was like, thank you. Yes, that's kind of like the vibe. So we will reconvene next Wednesday with Ghost Club Paranormal interview, and then the week after that, we're going to visit the Murder Corner again. And we're going to go into somebody that maybe you guys have not heard of or familiar with necessarily. His name is Carl Panzram. And he is a violent and interesting dude. And yeah, like he's fascinating. So he's going to be probably the next one we go into. And then we're just going to go out from there and cover more stuff. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. All right, guys. So have a good night. I will see you next week. And if you have any questions that I didn't get to answer, if you didn't, something you think of later that you were like, oh man, I should ask that, put it in the comment section below, please and thank you. Also, before I forget, we're still doing that. We're still doing that. We're still doing this. We're trying. We're trying. So please and thank you. We're still doing the Viper Room thing. So probably April. I don't know. We'll find out. But thank you guys for joining. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Sweet dreams after that. I know that's a lot. I know it's a lot to ask for sweet dreams after this episode, but please have a good one. And don't forget, stay spooky. Thanks, guys.